When it comes to car building, you don't always have to rewrite the recipe book.
What I try for is I try to have my own lightly tweaked, oh, that's pleasant, flavorful, but a little different chicken noodle soup. I stay there in that anchor, but I do my own little version.
Welcome to What Moves You, a Speedway Motors podcast where we tell the stories behind the cars and the people who build and drive them. I'm Joe McCullough, and in this episode, Steve Strope joins us to talk about how he blurs the lines between reality, history, and plausible reality to build attention-getting, award-winning cars. So the first question, start at the very beginning. How did you first start doing car stuff?
I can remember very far back being at friends of my parents' house, and they had boys that are older than me. So I'd be 4 or 5 years old, and their older boys were probably already 12, 10. And I was given a box of Hot Wheels, or actually they were Matchbox.
Mm-hmm. There's a difference.
And there is a difference. And as I got older and got those toys, and now later on in the story, I wind up doing work for Mattel. There's definite differences between Matchbox and Hot Wheels. But anyway, I remember clearly being enamored with the little green cigarette Indy car, the Jimmy Clark. I didn't know it back then, but it was the green Ford Lotus Indy car. Matchbox made a car of that, and that was the one I played with or used the most. I was very drawn to what appears to be performance automotive things. I'm from a very, very, very small farm town in upstate New York called Appalachian. So there's no real hot rods. There's no real muscle cars. There was stuff spattered around. Don't get me wrong. Luckily for me, immediate family lived very close. My parents lived a mile and a half, maybe, from my grandmother's house. Flanking my grandmother's house is one of my aunts and one of my uncles. So, and all the other, my father has multiple siblings, and they all live close by. Luckily for me, one of my cousins that lived on the side of the grandma's house, and the other house next door, had a mid-70s Camaro, and like everything in New York, 8 months out of the year, it's got snow tires on it, and it's just normal Camaro. But during the summer, he had hijacker air shocks, Lakewood traction bars, and Hooker chrome side pipes, chrome Cragger SS mags, Indy SS profile tires, so things sat with a stance. And I remember standing in there's a very large grass lawn field between my grandmother's house and my uncle's house, and I would just walk almost hypnotized from my grandmother's over to Uncle Dick's house, just staring at that Camaro. You're walking over there, you're looking directly at the side profile of the car, and was completely enamored with that car. Hanging in my office here, I have a drawing I made in 6th grade, one of the very few A's I ever got. I went to a very small private school, and I'm not kidding, the 12 kids in 6th grade became the 12 kids next year in 7th grade. Very small, very small. So anyway, I drew this car because I was in 6th grade, and one of the seniors named Jim, I know his first name, had a triple black 68 Roadrunner. I would almost miss the bus every day because I'd be at the other end of the parking lot where he parked it, just to watch him fire it up and drive away, and then have to run back to grab the bus. And it was 4-speed chrome aluminum slots, just perfect, and sounded real healthy from my memory. And then older guys will remember the J.C. Whitney catalogs. I just pour over them, all the cool chrome exhaust pipes for your Honda CB750, or your cool 4-hole window for your van, just everything and anything. And I modified every toy I had modified all my slot cars. Everything got altered and changed. Everything, nothing got left alone. And then discovered BMX along with a whole bunch of people like Timmy Strange. Strange sponsors a BMX team at over at Strange Motion. Zane Collin from Katati Speed Shop, Chip Foose. All of us grew up as BMX kids. And the BMX thing was the gateway drug because you learned how to use wrenches and tools. You also learned what it felt like to strip out a bolt, the things not to do. You also learned how to take pride in putting something together and it works properly. And it was a massive ocean of customization.
Right.
We'd go into the trails and ride. My bike is the chrome, Super Goose with GT Pro forks with red components. My friend David Rising was a blue PK Ripper with chrome components. So-and-so's bike was a white red line with red components. It's very personalized.
Right.
So that, in the words of Robert Peterson, the man who begat Hot Rod Magazine, a hot rod is a vehicle that is modified by the owner for better looks and performance. And if that wasn't my BMX bike, I don't know what is. So that, of course, luckily for me, a couple of guys nearby my house. I live out in the sticks. We have a road that went through Appalachian. Anyway, there was a whole bunch of guys that did dirt track, NASCAR, and asphalt. We had tracks right near me. The school, where my high school was, down in a town next to us, Owego, had a racetrack there. We had Shangri-La, 5 Mile Point. We had a speedway motorcycle track. So there was racing going on all around me, grassroots racing. So I would go down and watch these guys stick welding these, cobbled together roll cages in 73 Chevelles, And so that was, the hook had already been in my mouth with my cousin's Camaro and Jim's Roadrunner. But that just, did it. And obsessed. Anything I could get my hands on. There weren't a ton of car magazines around, but I would find one somewhere or get one from a cousin or something and obsess over that. Then it turned to, I actually got my first car, which was an old Cutlass. Then that went to a road race, SCCA road race setup, Carmen Gia. That went to a 67 El Camino. And then El Camino went through a couple of different evolutions. And when I moved from New York to California in 95, I brought that car out, timed it that I stopped at the Hot Rod Magazine Super Nationals in Ohio. And their editor, the aforementioned editor, Jeff Smith, pulled me aside with Rob Canan and said, "We want to feature your car for Hot Rod," which blew my mind. And I had the car before had a big blown 671 small block in it. And I had taken that engine apart, but taken all the parts with me. So in the front seat was a blower. My cylinder heads were in a box in the back in the bed, along with all my worldly possessions, which didn't take up much room. So they did the feature. And so it's actually my second magazine feature. My first one was not a feature. Another editor who became a longtime friend, Tim Burnsaw, took a shot of my El Camino at the Carcraft Nationals in Hamburg, New York. He was doing work for Truckin' magazine at the time. And was reporting in from various shows around the country, whether it was an all truck show or just an anything show. And he used my El Camino as a lead photo, 4 different trucks, and I was one of them. But as far as real honest feature, October of 95 was my feature with Hot Rod. So I move out here to California. I guess I got a photo in the bag, and then Custom Classic Truck and Custom Rodder featured the El Camino. Started working at Daigle's Rod and Truck in Orange. Before I moved to California, my main thing was playing music live. Missed that, joined a band, moved from Orange County up to Studio City, California. Moved in with a guitar player of a new band who started recording the second album. And I sold my El Camino and started building a 66 Dodge Charger that was known as Scully. And I built that in my shared underground tandem parking garage at my apartment.
I
And the
was going to
car,
ask you about that because I remember you telling me that one of your cars you build in a parking garage.
yeah, I built it there and then finished it off at a friend's place. He was the painter at a paint shop behind a BMW dealership, and I exchanged work. I rebuilt the small block and the front suspension in his Chevy pickup, and he painted the car for me and let me use his driveway and his little garage to finish the car off.
Mm-hmm.
I built that to take on the Power Tour, this new thing called Power Tour,
Right.
and debuted it here at Pomona, and Hot Rod Magazine featured it. Daytona Magazine Japan featured it. Mopar Muscle put it on the cover. End of the year, Hot Rod gave it top 10 car of the year, or one of the top 10 cars of the
Yeah.
year. And on that Power Tour, I met a really cool guy named Martin Weinreb, really cool 72 Challenger, just black Challenger. And I said, I got a really cool idea for your car. We started working on his car called Glendora in his driveway, his little garage. Finished that up around 2000 or so. Went on another Power Tour with that, featuring Hot Rod, Mopar Muscle, a whole bunch of other books, another top 10 car of the year. And Hot Rod called me up and said, we want you to build an El Camino for us. And I'm like, I don't have a shop. I don't have a garage. I don't have anything. And they're like, are you kidding? I'm like, no, I've got this Craftsman 3-drawer toolbox. That's all I got. So they let me build the El Camino there. The Hot Rod Carcraft shop was over by the Van Nuys Airport at that time. And so I built that car, the El Camino, for them. And, started coming to people saying, you should probably have a shop. I'm like, nobody wants to pay me to work on their car. And I took a leap of faith. Actually, my foot doctor at the time had a convertible GTO, so we did exchange work. So I was working on his GTO while he did my insoles, and I finally got the nerve to co-rent a shop. I got 500 square feet from the worst thing I possibly could have done. The guy was a woodworker, so I had sawdust all over everything I was working on. That was awesome. So anyway, got up the nerve to get my own building or my own unit to rent, and built a couple of really cool cars for a really neat Riviera called Tiki Riv that Popular Hot Rodding, a couple other books featured. And I sold Scully, my 66 Charger, to a really cool guy named Romeo. And at the same time, we bought a Duster here in Simi Valley for him for $100. And we built a car called Dustia that Reggie Jackson bought off him and still owns. Mm-hmm. And we took that car on Power Tour, and that car got cover, pull-out poster, screensaver, little die-cast car with Johnny Lightning, top 10 car of the year. We had the car, and I drove the car, the Power Tour. Anyway, where we ended over in the East Coast, I had the car parked. Hot Rod just finished shooting it. And this guy is walking up, looking around the car, looking around the Duster, and he goes, hey, it's a really nice car. Maybe you should like did this or that. And I don't know if I really like that, but that's pretty cool. And I go, are you, remember everyone who hasn't seen or heard of me before, I'm from New York, so you're going to take me with a grain of salt. But I go, are you buying the car? And he goes, no. And I go, well, then who cares what you think? It's, who cares? Unless you're shelling up some money, you telling me what I should have did with the car really isn't what I feel like hearing, Mm-hmm. Anyway, fast forward like 6 months, I get a phone call. Now I am living at my shop. My bed is next to my lift. I joined 24-hour fitness, so I have somewhere I can go shower. If you want something, you actually have to want to do it bad enough, where you live in a shop. And let me tell you, you haven't had fun till you live in an industrial area where you hear every noise and your unit is the same temperature as it is outside. If it's 114, you're 114. And believe it or not, it gets really cold in Southern California, and not compared to back home in New York, but mm-hmm. cold enough where I'm sleeping 3 layers with a ski hat and a hair dryer on a little chair next to me, blowing warm air on my head. So you gotta wanna. So I'm sitting there having my Cheerios at my desk, and the phone rings. This guy gets on. He goes, "Hey, I'm looking for Steve Strope." And I go, "Guilty." And he goes, "Hi, my name is David Hakeem. I work for the Chrysler Corporation, more specifically Mopar Performance. And we have been watching what you're doing, and you've had a whole bunch of top 10 cars and all this stuff, and they're all Chrysler products. And we would like to parallel ourselves with Pure Vision. We would like Pure Vision and Mopar Performance to run together, and for you to use our products so we could cross market." And I go, "Wow, that's really cool." And he's like, "Well, I've got so and so and so and so that's gonna, other gentlemen, high ranking people that he's gonna bring on the call, make it a conference call." And he goes, "You remember me?" And I go, "No, I don't remember you." And he goes, "Oh, you told me pretty much to go over and and I go, "You're the that was telling me what I should have did on the car, on the Duster?" He goes, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Well, still the same to you." So I laid plans. I called up Romeo because he sold the Duster to Reggie Jackson. And I said, "I've got this idea to do that big, dopey, early 70s Plymouth GTX. And the stock, they look like I believe my quote was, they look like elephants on stilts." I go, "But they're really, really curvy, put down low and done like European style. It'd be really cool." So he's down, and Chrysler gave us an engine and a whole bunch of parts. And I had the 8-stack intake. It was done like the old 392s where they actually bolt right to the cylinder heads at an angle. And that was all made by a local gentleman named Chris Wakeham, who was a sprint car driver and a master machinist. And it was the world's first paddle shifted muscle car. In fact, it was at that time, the only cars on the planet that had pedal shifting was Ferrari. Nobody else had pedal shifting. So we took it to SEMA. So my first time I go to SEMA, I'm unveiling a car with Chrysler with a press conference, and they have it up on this turntable, and the GTXR. And I'm like, it was very surreal, and everybody was sitting there playing with the paddles and having a good time. And one of the coolest things that happened from that, and the car got in a whole bunch of magazines and blah, 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 blah. But that car got chosen by the editor of Super Street, or Hot Imports, under his top 10 or top whatever cars from SEMA. And he even wrote, I know, this doesn't belong in here, but just look at it, And the car was all red with a red gut and white wheels and white stripes over the front fender, like Grand Sport stripes. And people were like, "Wow, that's really import style." And I'm like, "No, I took the white wheels from the Cadillac prototype Le Mans car, not foreign at all. It's Cadillac." But anyway, so that was a really big honor. I actually found the phone number to call the editor and go, "Wow, you crossed over barriers in front of your readership." And said, "This thing is so cool, I had to include it." That's a really big compliment when someone from the other side of our industry that focuses on different style of cars felt you made enough of an impact to include it. So that was really cool. And then it's just been unbelievably fortunate. I've become really good friends with a lot of the editors and people in the media and the press. But you know what? I am still thankful. Every time we do a photo shoot, I send thank yous, I call, and it's been, since 95 that the people in the press, whether it be video or whether it be print, feel that the stuff we're building is something that their readership or their viewership would like to see or learn about. It's not like the old days, when I was reading Hot Rod back home in Appalachian. My heroes, and my hero still is Scott Sullivan, Matt and Debbie Hay, Mark Grimes, and you older guys will know all their names. They were the Pro Street Kings. And those dudes did cars at the level like what I'm doing, or I'm trying to reach their level, is the more honest thing. They did that at home I was just talking with Matt. Hey, he brought that pink Thunderbird out because it's being made a Hot Wheels car, and there was a whole thing going on. We drove down and hung out, and I got parked next to him, and I had never met him, and and his wife Debbie. They in the magazine says so cool. It was never Matt Hay. It was Matt and Debbie Hay.
Mm-hmm.
Always
Mm-hmm.
said that way. So met them both, and just wonderful, wonderful people. And Matt was telling me when he was building that car, and he had built other cars before that T-Bird, other cars that I knew of, but the T-Bird was a really big impact, and Revell did a model kit of
Right.
it, and
Right.
it was a huge, huge hit car. He goes, I don't even have a brake. I take the aluminum and lower my garage door where I need to bend it, and then put the garage door back up. So again, if you want to bad enough, necessity is the mother of invention.
Mm-hmm.
Go do it. Look at what Matt Hay did in his garage in the 80s. Unbelievable. And the car still is gorgeous. The car still turns heads sitting there, let alone going
Yeah.
down a street.
Well, you could
So
even go back to the early days of hot rodding, kids building, Doyle Gamble coupe. I think it was chopped in his mom's driveway or something,
sure.
like
Oh
those
yeah,
guys
there's
didn't need big shops to build their cars.
yeah, and really famous drag racers like the Surfers.
Mm-hmm.
Those were four dudes building it in a garage in SoCal, a rail dragster. And a lot of guys did back then. They had the cars at home. Nevertheless, I've been very, very fortunate for all the media that has been following along and continues to follow with what we're doing, let alone, what we're doing right now, for Speedway and you to believe that I'm worth the airtime, that someone would be even interested in what I have to say or what I've done is a compliment, and I appreciate the opportunity. But that's really up to now. The shop's been open 2001, and just amazing hard work. I've got the greatest guys on the planet. Two of my guys, Pete and Kelly, have been with me for 16, 17 years. And for those of you in this industry, that's a long time for someone to stay at a hot rod shop.
Mm-hmm.
So I have great, loyal people who are brilliant. They're smart. They're hardworking. And most importantly, they're great humans. They're
Mm-hmm.
really nice people. I can trust them. And we've done just some amazing things because I am a small shop. Believe me, I've been to my contemporaries like Scott Brodowski at Hot Rods and Hobbies. His shop is like Taj Mahal. It's unbelievable. It's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful, just like everything he builds. Everything they do down there is stunning and incredible. My shop is not like that, but yet, because of hard work and great people working with me and lots of talent, we've won the Ford Design Award at SEMA Car of the Show 3 times. We've won the General Motors Design Award once, trying to get more. But we also, unprecedented, we won four of those four. We won three, a Ford, a GM, a Ford, back to back to back, 3 years in a row. And then, really wonderful accolades and awards at Grand National Roadster Show and other things like that. Bob Florine's 57 wagon won Street Rodder's Street Rod of the Year. So again, we're so fortunate. We worked really hard to do a good job, and I've got brilliant people around me that take my crazy ideas and make them real. But again, super fortunate that all the different media outlets like what we do and feel that, again, their viewership or their readership would enjoy learning about what it is we had put together. So that's kind of up now. And along the way, I lucked out and got involved with Mattel. Before I opened my shop, I actually had a job doing prototype work for Mattel. Met a bunch of the guys that were managers or engineers down there or marketing people. I opened my shop. I'm starting to travel, going to car shows, and in the airports, I'd run into those guys here and there at LAX. And I joked around and said, "How many big feature cars I got to do before I can have some of my own toys?" Ha ha, And I meant it totally, ha ha.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "You know what? That's a good idea. Let's put a meeting together next week." And I go, "What?" And so I did a really cool 12 car line, and the normal Hot Wheels are 64th scale. These were a little bigger at 50 scale, and it went global. And part of my contract is they put my Pure Vision logo in the back window of each car, and the whole packaging on the back was Pure Vision and a thing about the shop. I mean, that's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's unheard of. And also, while this is also happening, I'm doing a bunch of filming, different shows, being asked to be on different stuff. Was part of a really great program called Cars.tv. And the episode we did building the Anvil Mustang, we won a daytime Emmy with it.
Hmm.
And then I got approached after doing some video work for Ford's Mustang's 50th anniversary. The guy that was directing that called me up like out of the blue 6 months after filming with me and said, "Hey, me and my partner, we have a production company, and we want to take you to Discovery Motor Trend and do a show with you," and which we did, and forced the issue that there would be no scripts. There's not going to be any bearded tattoo lunatics throwing wrenches and fake arguments. And we'll just leave it this simple. I had very blunt conversations about that,
Mm-hmm.
and I would not allow it. And the coolest thing is after we took a year and a half to film 6 episodes because I wouldn't rush anything. We would not fake anything. And since then, they've still been rerunning it here and overseas in Europe. And I've gotten tons of really great, people coming up to me or emailing or calling. And the coolest thing isn't the high majority of them all don't go, "Oh, you're the greatest builder in the world," or "Your designs are the coolest ever." Every one of them, or all but every one of them, are like, "Thank you so much for not having a fake show
Right.
and actually just explaining how you design and how you guys build and showing us putting together a cool car," which is exactly what I told the brass. I go, that's what any real car guy wants to watch. So, and then also when you said, how did we get to this point? Also, I got asked to be in. We had cars in 3 of the Fast and Furious movies. Most people know Hammer, the car at the end of Tokyo Drift. Um, they pull it out at the very very end and use it for a scene they added on to bring Vin Diesel's character back into the franchise. Um, So lots of really cool, amazing things and opportunities that um, it's because I love this.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, as everyone watching knows, car guys are like the nicest guys on the planet. All
Absolutely.
my friends, all the people I do business with, yourself included, just really nice. As I said about my employees, they're really nice humans. They're really nice people. Whether they're all into Corvettes and Camaros and blowing fuel alters, it is not the point. Vast majority of car guys are usually really down to earth, nice, pleasant people. Um, so that's made it, really easy to be in this industry because you're surrounded by good people.
Mm-hmm.
So
The magazines love featuring your cars because it's not just, well, we threw these wheels on because we thought they would look cool. Like there's always, my perception of your cars is that they're always super well thought out. I mean, like the Martini Mustang, who comes up with that? Like, let's take
that's
basically an
my
Indy
favorite car.
car
My
motor.
favorite car that I've done is the Martini.
That was going to be one of my questions because that's, I mean, like, I'm going to be honest and say that's my favorite car that you've done too, just because it's like such a cool blending of all of these crazy ideas, but it's just the perfect package. And so my bigger question, I guess, other than gushing about the Mustang, is like, how would you describe your philosophy or your style when it came to approaching a project like that?
So when I design a car, I'm going in a certain direction. In the case of the Martini Mustang, I try to take a good amount of reality, history, and plausible reality. So the Martini is a good example. So Ford, their first racing with the Mustang was racing at the Tour de France rally in Europe in October of '64. The Mustang took first and second place.
Hmm.
That allows me to springboard with my imagination of, Ford is perfectly fine with racing the Mustang in Europe. Good. What if I fast forward and Ford got involved with Martini arguably one of the most famous liveries in road racing, next to golf.
Right.
Martini's usually always with Porsche, but who cares? Anything could have happened in the 60s, right? Now, sharp motorsports historians watching this know that Martini was not doing anything really in the mid 60s. It was a little later. Again, who cares? It's my sandbox. I can play with it. Ford also in 66 won Indy with Jim Clark, the little Matchbox I was talking about, with a Ford Lotus designed 4-cam small block. That motor, later, they were all stamped LMI, Lewis Meyer Industry, which is the motor that's in the Martini. It's an LMI stamped block. The remaining ones were bought up by AJ40, restamped AJF, and were used in sprint cars. And they were reversed, the cylinder heads. So here you have your Indy car with your bundle of snakes coming out the top and going to the back. You unbolt the heads and switch them. Now the exhaust ports are on the bottom. Right. That's how they use them in a sprint car, with headers out the side. So I went down to Ed Pink's, and I wanted to use a Cosworth motor. And Frank Housewith at the time was running Pink's. And he said, you don't want that noise, because you have to preheat the oil and the antifreeze before you can even start the thing up. I went, ugh, what else you got? He goes, ooh, we got this Indy 4-cam motor. And I'm like, mine is it. And he showed me, I go, oh, the thing in Jimmy Clark's, yeah. He goes, we can convert these, it's, Hillborn style 8-stack. He goes, we can convert that to EFI, have Ed, redo the math and back off the cams, and you could 9,000 RPM this on the street. And I'm like, yeah. And so now I want to put this 4-cam motor in a Mustang, and I'm doing more, I'm putting together the theme. I want to do the Martini livery. I want to do it like a rally car. And so I over there in my study, I have every issue printed of Hot Rod Magazine. And so I'm flipping through, because that's a reference library, let alone all the other books I have. And smack on the cover of Hot Rod Magazine is a 67 Mustang with a Indy 4-cam motor in it, built but with Autolite, I believe, to go to Bonneville to set records. So now I'm completely justified that Ford would put an Indy 4-cam motor in a Mustang to do something with motorsports. Already done. So I do what if Ford got together with Martini and said, hey, we want some on the road miles on this 4-cam motor. It's already lived the wide open throttle at the Indy 500, should be able to drive around, And so I set the car up with, the foot support for the guy who's reading the directions, reading the notes, and all these little things from Road Rally. I went over to Goodwood over in England and bought a bunch of cool switches and warning lights that are all European stuff. And voila, the car is born. So all of it's never happened, but it's all based on plausible. And when you do it, you go all the way, go to the 1%, 2%. I found out while reading about Mustangs in Europe that Ford did not have the rights to use the word Mustang on their car. So a Mustang shipped to England had a badge on it called the T5.
So that's why it's a T5R. I could never figure out. Okay.
I used the R from the 350 GT350R. So it's a T5R, which never existed, but it did in my garage. And then mixed old and new, that unbelievable motor, but yet all the suspension was Detroit Speed stamps their cradles, their suspensions, and that the suspension in the Martini Mustang is serial number 2. Number 1's in their testimonial.
Oh, that's cool.
So we unveiled brand new product on the car, but yet it looks like an old 60s race car. It's a lot of fun to drive. Amazing car. My favorite car. There's other ones really close, but the Martini, that motor was that was it.
For pictures of a few of the cars mentioned in today's episode, check out the toolbox at speedwaymotors.com by clicking the toolbox link on the front page. New episodes of What Moves You come out every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you like what you hear, tell a friend to listen to What Moves You on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. So I want to, speaking of your philosophy, kind of go to the other end of the spectrum. You know, people who are listening to this are going to think like, yeah, well, you know, anybody can throw a ton of money at and an IndyCar engine at a car and make it cool. But your Oldsmobile, it's the other end of the spectrum completely. Talk about your philosophy when it comes to something like that.
Going with everything's a theme, that makes it safe because it should corral you. All your decisions should go with that theme.
Mm-hmm.
Don't stray outside of it. In other words, don't build a nostalgia day two muscle car and then put three-piece HRE wheels on it, even though three-piece HRE wheels are works of art. It's not the right part for the car. It visually doesn't go with the plan. So my Oldsmobile, I just wanted something fun to drive. And it actually started life as something called Project Long Weekend. Everything on the car was something you could do over a long weekend. Bolt on the Hotchkiss suspension, put in the vintage air, put in Dynamat sound deadening, put in the Dakota digital gauges, put in the disc brakes, all of it over a long weekend. And we were going to film it that way. And it didn't work out that way. And then we wound up putting it on the show, having me finish it. And that car is intended to be driven cross country. Everything about it is to get in it, be comfortable, drive and cruise. And I had discovered those Cragger mags that look like Hurst old wheels. And I don't know how I missed them. And they were like perfect for Oldsmobiles and Pontiacs. And they're like $190 a rim, you know, 17s. Like, that's perfect. Just a nice, clean, the color I found on a Mercedes at a parking lot at a pizzeria. It's Mercedes quartz blue. And I did the interior in saddle. And the interior, I vinyl dyed the dash pad. No, correction. I gave it to Just Dashes to restore. The door panels are out of like OPG. And the seats, I found a pair of used Porsche Panamera seats for $600 for the pair. Free shipping. I don't know how I worked that out because they weigh a ton. And they're like multiple way power, everything heated and cooled. I had to purchase, I think it cost me $10 for the wiring diagram for the seats. 31 pages of wiring diagram for the driver's seat. So we could find the 4 wires that provide power to the switches to make all the motors work, and the wire for the seat heater, and the wire to provide power to the seat cooler. The Porsche controls it all on the flat screen, where you can make it hotter or colder or whatever. So we had to just put switches in the side of the seat, but who cares? I have an on-off switch for the heater, and then for the fan, I have a rocker switch, low and high speed for the cooler. Most fully powered, heated, cooled seats are really thick, you know. These seats, I kid you not, are like that. They're engineering marvel, and they sit perfectly flat. You got to like modify the front tabs to have 2 bolt holes here, and the back ones already have holes in the back. Putting it in my Oldsmobile was like, except for the wiring nonsense that Pete, you know, deciphered all the wiring. But it's got a hidden awesome sound system from Kicker. It's straightforward. A self-powered subwoofer and 1 amp driving 6x9s in the back and 6 inches in the kicks. You know, Dynamat, Dynaliner, Dynapad, and it's got a 200R transmission that I got 20 some years ago. Me and an editor at Hot Rod named Terry McGeehan. He's been the editor at Hemmings Muscle Machines forever. But he was at Hot Rod at the time. We went down to Pick Your Part in Sun Valley, half price weekend, got the transmission for $20 out of a Oldsmobile station wagon, brought it back, changed the filter, put it in my Buick. I drove it around for 15 years like that, pulled it out, refreshed it, painted it, put it in my Oldsmobile. boom. You know, just when I bought the Oldsmobile, somebody had it for sale out in front of a Yamaha Triumph motorcycle dealership, and had a freshly gone through little 330 Oldsmobile in it.
Mm-hmm.
I put a Joe Mandello cam in it, Edelbrock intake and carburetor, converted it to HEI and a police heavy duty alternator. Yeah. So just a really clean, straightforward car. And Scotty at Dynamet called me up. He had somebody back out and he needed a car in the booth at SEMA, and we
Mm-hmm.
didn't have one of our big deal cars done. And I said, I got my Oldsmobile. It's nice. It's it's a nice car, but it's
Mm-hmm.
he's like, just bring that. So I brought it, and I like throngs around it, and different people like Todd Ryden, who has his own marketing thing now, but
Mm-hmm.
he did tons and tons of stuff for MSD back in the day. He was like, "This is my favorite car here." I'm like, "Have you walked around? There's a lot of nice stuff here." And he's like, "No." He goes, "I could go home and build this thing. Maybe not to your level, but I could go build this thing right now." I'm like, yeah, very straightforward car. But again, that was the program. I wanted a really nice little simple street machine with cool little touches to it that were neat and fun, and nice colors, so it looks good going down the road. And so that's what I focused on,
Mm-hmm.
was doing something like that. So we're everything I do is like that. But example is we're bringing a '67 Chevelle to SEMA this year, in Dynamat's booth, and it is aqua aqua and white. It's what I'm referring to as the anti-SEMA car, because it's not murdered out with
Mm-hmm.
charcoal grays, slammed on the ground with 24s and twin turbos with engine covers, and there's none of that. It has a semi-flat black engine bay, like factory. We deburred the block in the heads. It has a 511-inch big block in it with Weber carburetors.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. And 17-inch ET3 5 spokes, full polish, all its factory chrome. It is a Malibu. We did not make it a fake SS. It doesn't have an SS hood. It doesn't have an SS blacked out tail panel.
Mm-hmm.
But believe me, especially the interior, the seat inserts, I bought the last roll in the country, 5 foot by 5'3" of roll of 62 Dodge Polara seat insert material. That's this funky 60s, like all these different layers of thin little rectangles overlapping them in like 3 different shades of turquoise, aqua.
Oh man.
And it's real funky groovy, but it's a real nice street machine. It's
Mm-hmm.
a nice mix of the suspension's Detroit speed, Willwood brakes. It'll be able to go down the road just fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But and those colors are really light, light aqua, and the interior being white and aqua. It's not dark, sinister, trying to whatever it is. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and it'll be. I don't know if you saw the scamp we did for Bob
Mm-hmm.
Flooring.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. We brought that last year, and it's butternut yellow with a cream interior, and it's very different than Park to the Sea of dark, evil, sinister cars,
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. So it was its own, it was like a little dandelion, sitting there in the middle of the field. And it was fun. It's nice to bring something fresh, and the cars aren't complicated. These aren't, they're not like the twin turbo Camaro we did, or
Mm-hmm.
um, other cars with tons and tons of work, like Bob's two-door wagon. I try really, really hard to design something that's going to look great 20 years from now. There's no trendy. I don't do anything trendy because everything is based off historic most of the time with me.
Right. Well,
I
and it
mean,
also seems like your cars sort of pay tribute to the car that it's based on. Your Chevelle still looks like a Chevelle. Your Mustang still
oh
looks
yes.
like a Mustang. It's not chopped and 3/4 scale and 4-inch wide fender flares. And yeah. And I say that with now condescension, but I have built things like that don't really look like the things that they're supposed to be. But 20 years from now, they might not be quite as cool.
Yeah, I like the opportunity for it to age gracefully and still, someone go, hey, that's a good looking fill in the blank,
Mm-hmm.
that's a good looking Mustang. Cool, you know. So I try very hard at that. But usually you don't have to focus a lot on that if your designs and your programs or your ideas are based in, something concrete,
Hmm.
traditional or what have you. It gives it a fighting chance. Now, I've said this before in other interviews, so I want to make it really, really clear. There's nothing wrong with pushing the edge and pushing the envelope, and it has to happen. So there's always the dudes that are going to go, full bore and crazy mods and all the rest. And I try to do it in a subtle way. I've done cars with crazy mods, but we try to have it blend in with the project.
Hmm.
But I've said this before in other interviews in the past where I kind of look at designing or hot rodding like cooking. You need that weird, barely anything on the plate, $350 plate of French, whatever it is. You need it to keep evolving the culinary world, but you also need it to prove how fundamental, how cornerstone chicken noodle soup is. Chicken noodle soup is as bare bones basic as it gets, but it always works, especially when you need it, when you're sick, not feeling good.
Hmm.
Chicken noodle soup, that's a flatline deal, but it proves it weighs itself by default against that $350 plate of whatever the hell that is. That's
Hmm.
going to come and go. That's going to get forgotten next year after the next amazing chef comes with the next thing. But nobody's forgotten chicken noodle soup ever, whether it be in a can or your grandma's. So they both counterbalance each other. So what I try for that, or I should say what I'm comfortable doing, is I try to have my own lightly tweaked, oh, that's pleasant, flavorful, but a little different chicken noodle soup.
Hmm.
I stay there in that anchor, but I do my own little version.
Right.
You stop at some roadside cafe and they've got this version of chicken noodle soup. Like, wow, that's really good. That's what I try for. You know, it's something that is based. You're comfy with it. You know it, but it's a new version of it. Like, wow, that's just fantastic. So I know that sounds weird, but it's the best way for me to kind of vocalize uh, my design mind frame.
No, I love that. I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
So what are you working on now, and what are your plans for the future? I mean, anything that you can discuss that's not top secret.
Well, the Chevelle that we're showing up with, we've got a wide body 71 Corvette that's going to come out. That's really cool. Side pipes, flares, very 70s. Um, we have a 67 Corvette Roadster that we haven't started yet. That's going to be really nice, but a lot of little modifications, but you're going to have to be a Corvette guy to know we even did it.
Hmm.
And we have another Mustang, a 66 fastback that yeah, we're hopefully filming that. I mean, I'm being filmed with friends. I'm not having a network come in.
Hmm. Hmm.
And hopefully we're also doing a book about it. It's going to be as much as a documentary of history as it's going to be, hey, check out this cool car we're building.
Hmm.
It's got some really big names attached to it, an extremely cool engine. Um, yeah, that car is going to be that's a few years away, but that car is going to be one of the next. That's going to be a heavy hit car,
Hmm.
which is neat because it's based on almost all old speed parts
Hmm.
and some stuff that really nobody can get their hands on. That I've been very fortunate to be allowed to get my hands on.
Hmm.
So that's gonna be one. There's a coming down the pike. There's gonna be a really cool 67 pickup that I will say this much. When it's done, please remember you heard it here from me. I had that truck designed years before everybody was building C10s. I
Right.
had it originally designed for George Poteet. And he wound up, he just invested so much in doing so much with the land speed racing that
Mm-hmm.
that was that. And that's fine. And another gentleman overheard me talking about it at lunch and said he wanted to do it. So the truck has been purchased. All the really special parts that make the truck have been purchased. He's in line waiting to get his turn in the shop. So that thing's going to be pretty darn cool too.
You
Yeah,
talk about your hot rod library, old hot rods just as well as anybody. And so this pickup that you're building is kind of, I mean, it's just kind of an old timey hot rod with
yeah,
some twist,
yeah.
right?
I've got a really really neat little 1931 Model A pickup that the gentleman that owned it passed away, and he was a machinist and an ex-naval officer. I was told, and it shows in the truck. And I've got registrations in a leather little satchel, leather pouch in the truck that he never threw away his registration slips. And I've got it going back 52, 53 years. I don't know how long in total he's owned the truck, but I know he had it at least 50 some years. Split wishbones, juice brakes, uh, little hopped up Corvette small block, LaSalle 3-speed trans, um, Culver City cast quick change, which is really early
Mm-hmm.
and extremely cool, and not a ton of them. So I'm going to change the rear to an actual drive shaft instead of the torque tube. I'm going to take all his work underneath there and perfect it, clean up everything, and either paint it or chrome plate it. Um, I'm going to do a different drop deck, so I'm going to put a little more of a drop in it. I have a extremely cool 65 Corvette 327 that Jeff Smith has rebuilt for me, mildly high strung, and it's got a fully polished tunnel ram, polished velocity stacks, polished Corvette valve covers, chrome plated water pump, polished finned oil pan. The truck's going to go all Hugger orange. I love Model A pickups in orange or in yellow. So all Hugger orange. And if it's not going to be orange, it's going to be chrome plated. I'm going to chrome the firewall. Very 60s angel hair show car.
Mm-hmm.
No hood or hood sides, just wide open to that tunnel ram motor. But and a 4-speed, taking the LaSalle 3-speed out. I got a 4-speed for it. Really, really neat, fun hot rod. It's very, very clear that it's a hot rod, that's for sure. And I love love 60s racing, whether it be NASCAR, sprint car, drag racing. And this will obviously be extremely heavily visually leaned towards drag racing.
Mm-hmm. For some reason, I'm picturing it with Krager SS wheels, but I don't believe you would do that. What do you have the wheels picked out yet?
Oh, they're polished real wheels,
Oh,
Halibrands,
okay, like the big
big
window, like
window
a
polished
Halibrand
Halibrands.
Sprint. Yeah.
Yeah, they're the Eric Vaughn's real wheels, actually, with the Pat that owns Real Riders Wheels, same wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rear is what they call a trick 8. They take the face of a 10-inch rim and then weld an 8 on the back. So from the front, it has the deep dish of a 10,
Right.
but it's only the width of the 8, so you fit in the little fenders, and then
Right.
polished little 4.5 or 5-inch fronts. And yeah, that against orange is going to look pretty boss.
Oh yeah.
Well, and I'll paint the quick change bells, but polish the center and chrome plate the buggy spring, and a lot of very traditional hot rod um, visual cues.
I mean, that brings us up to date, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah, I have that in my '67 Buick Skylark that's done like a late '60s funny car. I put a 4-bar and a dropped axle in that, which was not easy to do, because I can tell you right now, the front of a 67 GM A body has nothing to do with the front of a 32 Ford.
No.
Nothing. And you would think you would have more room in the A body, the Skylark, the Chevelle. Nah, no, it's worse. The motor's in a completely different location compared where the center line of the front axle is. Axle on a 32 Ford, it's underneath the radiator out front of the motor.
Mm-hmm.
The axle, the center line of the front wheels is through the middle of the engine on a Chevelle. And I moved the wheels forward 5 inches like a funny car, put the wheels all the way up to the front bumper. And still, that axle has to go underneath the engine. And I've got a blown 426 Hemi in the thing with full zoomies and slicks, and it's going to run on the street that way.
That's not done yet, right?
No, it's in bare
Okay.
metal, and it's been sitting. Of course, I'm the shoemaker with no shoes.
Right.
I did finish the Oldsmobile. I am driving the Oldsmobile.
I've heard you talk about that Buick before, and I mean, that just sounds wild. I can't wait to see it done.
Yeah, it's nasty. It's pretty cool, and I've owned it a long time. I bought it off a lady, believe it or not, in Pasadena. And Mrs. Reinhold, her and her husband moved here from Germany in the end of '66. They bought the car in February of '67, and I bought it in '96. So '67 to '96, they owned it 29 years, right? I've owned it since '96. So I'm climbing up on owning it as long as they did.
Did it run when you bought it?
Oh, it was parked on carpet in her garage when I got it. Still had the rear fender skirts on.
And you made it into a funny car.
It was my daily car. I drove it every day. Hell yeah.
Some Buick nut out there is going to be listening to this and go nuts about you turning a car like that into a funny car. I think it's fantastic, but
yeah, I all but immediately put it on the ground, just slammed it, and had a cool set of like center lines on it, and just it's white with a blue interior and a blue vinyl top, and drove it like that for years. And it sat bitching. I had my old painter, the guy before Mick, Russ Stevenson. I was following him somewhere, and he was going to drop off a car, and then we were going to go to lunch or something. And he dropped the car off, and he got in the car, and he goes, "You want to sell this thing?" And I go, "No." He goes, "Dude, this thing coming around a corner looks like a shark." Awesome. And I'm like, "Yeah, well, no, you can't sell it. I'm never selling it. So you can't buy it." But it's going to be aggressive going down the highway with full slicks and full zoomies and a blown Hemi, and I'm going to be pretty nasty.
Thanks to Steve Strope for being our guest today, and thanks to all of you for listening to What Moves You, a Speedway Motors podcast. To see photos we referenced in today's episode, visit the toolbox at speedwaymotors.com. Email the podcast at podcast@speedwaymotors.com, and if you like what you heard, tell a friend where to find us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks for our season finale.